which was designed by the famous modernist architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Thank you so much, both of you, for being part of this series. Janet and Chuck brought with them a few display panels that they just exhibited near the elevators on the 3rd floor. Please take a look at them. They're very interesting. They're about history of Cincinnati modern architecture. So our upcoming presentations from my Cincinnati house are on July 14th at 2 p.m. We have Dave Salmon. He owns a very rare example of a Greek revival temple form house, which was built in the 1840s in Riverside, and so that should be a very fascinating talk. And then after that, September 8th, also Saturday at 2 p.m., Ted Gans will do a presentation about his home, originally built in 1860 on Sycamore Street over the Rhine. And Ted restored 3 side-by-side buildings, and he created a wonderful complex that now includes his residence, his art studio, and sculpture gallery. And then between the 2 buildings, he also built a magnificent Italianate garden. So that should also be a very rich and wonderful talk. So I hope you can come for these presentations as well. So today, we're thrilled to introduce Janet Robert and Chuck Lohr. Janet is a writer specializing in architecture and design, and Chuck, who owns an advertising agency, studied architecture at the University of Kentucky, and they both love their house. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. So our Cincinnati house was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in the 1950s, and it was commissioned by Cedric Boulter and Patricia Niles Boulter. The house is on the Register of the Historic Buildings in Cincinnati, and it was listed there May 14, 1999 by the previous owners. We are 3rd in line. So in 1949, Pat's parents, who lived in Minneapolis, commissioned Mr. Wright to design a home for them, which he did. And at that point, Pat said, "Will you design a home for me, Mr. Wright, when I'm married?" And he said, "Of course." So they did that. So Pat and Cedric are married, and they go on the search for property to build their Wright home. They looked all over the Cincinnati area, including northern Kentucky, but in the end they selected a lot in a subdivision in Clifton called Rawson Woods. Now this was fortunate because the spot was close to UC, where both Pat and Cedric were employed. They were employed by the classics department. Cedric was a professor, I believe, of both Latin and Greek, and Pat was a researcher there on staff, and both of them held PhDs in classics. Cedric was receiving his doctorate from the department in '39, and he enjoyed a long and distinguished career as one of the premier historians of Greek art in North America. Pat would later, Mr. Boulter seems to, or Dr. Boulter seems to be talked about a lot, but Pat was no slouch. She would later earn distinction as a book editor in her field. But the quest for the site, I want to go back a little bit and tell you about Rawson Woods Circle. And as I mentioned, it is a subdivision of the Rawson estate. And that all came about in 1925 when Middleton Avenue was cut through their property. I don't want to get too much ahead of myself because I want to kind of stick in some chronology. But around that time, 1925, is when the Hudson family gave about 8 acres, and they followed up 3 years later with 2.5 more acres to create the Rawson Woods Bird Preserve. That is a close to the public park that is maintained by our Cincinnati Parks Department. The Rawson subdivision had 28 lots, and the first home was a colonial, and it was a colonial revival built in 1925 for Martha Rawson, who was a great-granddaughter of Joseph Rawson. Joseph came to Cincinnati from Massachusetts in 1829, just as Cincinnati was really coming into its own and booming. Now, I just want to sidebar for a second and tell you a little bit about some of the homes on the street. There is the first modern home in Cincinnati. That was completed by an architecture firm called Potter, Tyler, and Martin. And that home is really in the Art Deco or Art Moderne style, and that was to have begun life, though, as a tutor. And at some point, Yes, a transformation. It became that first modern home, as I mentioned, in Cincinnati, and that was designed for Agnes Potter Laurie, no relation, different spelling, and her husband, Gail, who was a UC professor of political science. Not that that really means anything, but following that home's construction from 33 to 35, an international style home was built for George Maine, and Samuel Hannaford's grandson, Eldridge, built a home on our street for himself. So back to Joseph for a moment. He's 21 years old, and he is a clerk in a meat packing company. It's Harshorn and Childs Pork Packers. And Mr. Joseph Rawson would come to own that company and rename it Joseph Rawson and Sons Company. The offices and warehouse were on Sycamore between 9th and Court. And Mr. Rawson's wife, Mary Whiting Richards, was 7 years younger than Joseph, was also originally from Massachusetts and came to Cincinnati as a girl. I'm not sure how they met, but it is interesting to note that her sister married Childs of the pork packer Childs, and they would go on, Mary and Joseph would go on to have 8 children. So it is somewhere mid-career for Joseph. Their family is born, and Joe Rawson's 4 sons would come to join him in business. Now that business expanded from meat packing into insurance and real estate, chemical manufacturing, and banking. So Joseph would become one of the first investors and I guess a co-owner of First National Bank. And I want to sidebar on that for a second because Joseph had the foresight to hire the famed Chicago architect Daniel Burnham. And as you might know, or you will now, Daniel Burnham was a contemporary of Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright. And Mr. Burnham's skyscraper at that point is at the southeast corner of 4th and Walnut. But Burnham would go on to design several more properties and buildings in Cincinnati. And he, of course, is one of the original architects of the Chicago School. He did design the Union Savings and Trust Building. That's at the northwest corner of 4th and Walnut. And that was for Jacob Schmidlap. That was 1899. Burnham would also get the commission to do the Schmidlap Memorial Library, which is now the entrance to the Art Museum. And he would also go on to add a section to the Shillito Building and the Elms and Depke Building. He would put an addition on that. And at the time of his death in 1912, Burnham was probably the largest architectural company in the world. But Joseph does die at 80, or in his 80s in 1891, and at that point, it's when Mary and the family moved to Clifton. They were in residence at 319 Race Street, which sounds like an odd address because I think the numbering system changed, because that is the site of the Phoenix Club that was constructed in 1894. So Mary and her 2 sons, 2 of her 4 sons, would go on to have 3 adjacent homes on Clifton Avenue. And if I'm doing my math correctly, they might have as many as 75 acres combined. Now what's interesting is the last of that Rawson estate is now currently under development. There is room for 11 residences. 1 is built, and a sign that's up there for Rawson Farms, that's the new subdivision, says 3 parcels are left. So anyway, Mary would live at Centerwood, that's at 3767 Clifton Avenue, and at some point following that move in 1891, they would get some 50 acres and then keep adding on to that. We do know that some of that land was given over to farming, and I should mention at this point that while it might sound a little impressive that I did some research, I really found this book on the Hudson family, and it was written in, or published in 1992, and it traces the Rawson family from 1831 to 1991. And this is where I found out that Joseph's son, Edward, would be one of those 3 houses along Clifton Avenue that you can now see. You couldn't see them for the longest time because they're set pretty far back. But he would go on to have 6 children of his own, and one of those children was Marion Rawson. Marion Rawson, like Pat Boulter, was a Bryn Mawr alumna. She studied politics, economics, and psychology, but she never studied archaeology, for which the college is well known. Marion would later become associated with Cincinnati's UC's Classics department. She went on to earn an international reputation for her archaeological work, along with the dean of the school at that time. And she went on to author 4 highly detailed volumes on the finding at Troy, which Cincinnati sponsored that dig, with Dr. Carl Bleeg, and I think I'm saying that right. And what would happen is that this set of 4 volumes was so meticulous and so well documented that it would go on to become the model and standard of excellence for archaeological publications. And that was written in this book by Mrs. Boulter. So that was a lot of fun to research those days, when those were the glory days of UC's Classics department. But Pat would go on to become very, very personally and professionally acquainted with Marion, and she details some of the dinners that she spent in that house on Clifton Avenue. And it was Marion who suggested to Pat, after this long, exhaustive search for their property to build the Wright house, it was Marion who went on to say to Pat, "Why don't you take that last lot on Ross and Woods? I'll give you a good deal." And that is that's the prelude to our Cincinnati house, and I'll turn it over to Chuck now.
Patricia Niels Boulter's parents had a Wright home in Minneapolis, and that's one of the reasons they got involved with it. But I understand that Cedric was very interested in having a Wright home, so there was a team effort on it. This is the first letter sent to Wright asking him would he consider a commission. And then this is the famous short letter of Mr. Wright to accept the commission. This is another letter, typical. They acknowledge each other's letters back and forth, and we have handwritten drafts of letters that were saved in our archives. The original would be in Taliesin archives, of which all are available. That just talks about acquiring a tract of land. And then this was a timeline of the house that Pat Boulter gave us. It finds the site, and then they moved in April of '56, and then shortly after that they had a guest edition. So Eugene Masslink was secretary to Frank Lloyd Wright and signed most of the correspondence with us, just outlining what they need to do. This is a letter by Pat saying we found the site, and that they've set a budget of $25,000 for their home. And I think I have a duplicate of this thing. Same thing here. So this is the site photographs. Wright required you to send in photographs of the site, as well as a topographical survey of the site. And these are where the trees are. He wanted to know where the trees were. And it's kind of a lot and a half. This is the half lot. That's the full lot. Or no, I'm mistaken here. This is the circle here, and they split this lot between the home on this side and this parcel here. So this is the list of the requirements that the Boulters wanted sent to Taliesin. And just within a few months, they got the sketch of their house back. Now, this looks like the Boulter house, but it's not. It's the Sturtevant house. See, as Wright did many times, if he had drawn a house that never got built, and he got a plan of a landscape in that matched, he would repurpose the drawing that he had in his vault. So that's what he did with the Sturtevant house. It was never built, and it was equally on a very steep south-facing corner lot, and which caused it to be a two-story Usonian, which is very unique. Only maybe 10% of the homes were two-story. Wright invented and enjoyed the ranch style. So this is our plans of the house that the Goslings put together for the Historical Register documentation, and very much like the Sturtevant house, except the Sturtevant house had a bathroom squeezed in between the fireplace and the kitchen. So the living room was 4 feet shorter on the Sturtevant house. This is the second floor where there's 400 square foot or 300 square foot bedrooms, and then a little bit larger bedroom on the end. Pat and Cedric didn't have a master bedroom. They didn't have the same bedroom. Cedric was 20 years Pat's senior. So we kind of refer to it as Dick Van Dyke house. It's just a letter asking for one of the payments that it was 10%, Janet, of the...
You would pay Mr. Wright
10% of the construction cost, the furniture, and the landscaping. So here's their acknowledgement letter that they sent. And they said that they initially got an estimate of $40,000 to build the home instead of $25,000 as what they had budgeted. Now, I'm really amazed at these because, frankly, and I guess pun intended, this is the least expensive Wright home, but one of the least expensive that I've ever seen. The first Jacob's house was built in '45 for $5,000, but that was his original micro ranch house, and he even threw in the cost for the screens at the last minute and didn't charge them because he wanted to make the $5,000 budget. This is the builder that was chosen, and the list of some of the additional extras, which I think amounted to a couple $1,000. But one piece of documentation that the descendants of George Schaefer came to our house because their great-grandfather had worked on our house, and they shared with us this handwritten documentation from the Schaefer archives. And here at the top we have 14 2x8 mullions. Well, those 14 pieces of wood are all that holds up the south side, or half of the house actually, you know. That's the unique thing about the home. The north side is a 8-inch thick concrete U, and the south side has 14 2-inch by 8-inch pieces of wood. So here we get into the rough sledding on building the house. The building commissioners reject the plans by Frank Lloyd Wright. And here are their objections. Carport has to be fireproofed, and window mullions cannot be used structurally as columns. And that's what he did. He just put these 2x8s up, and he put a piece of glass, 42-inch piece of glass in between them. The house was built on a 4-foot module. Chimney, ceiling height. They didn't think the roof rafters were strong enough to carry the load. And I have to admit, as soon as I bought the house, I did the load calculations. And the timbers are plenty strong. The upper roof members are Douglas fir, strongest wood known. It's 4 inches thick, 14 inches deep, and there are 2 of them. There's 2 pairs of those for every 11 mullions. So believe me, it's strong enough. So here's Wright's reply to the building department. Ridiculous here. Objection is ridiculous. You know, Wright was friends with the Boulters, and Pat and Cedric enjoyed the process. So if you were a good client, he would allow you to raise the height of your ceiling. Cedric was a tall gentleman, so if you go to Jacob 2, you'll see the very low ceiling, you know, in our house. It's at least I can't reach it. They raised the chimney. They straightened out the flue. And now, you know, Frank liked to take the, sorry, Mr. Wright, I'm sorry, after 9 years, I talked to her like I know him as a father, but take an 8-inch block and they stepped it back, and that's called corbelling. And the building department didn't like that technique. You know, I was just talking about this the other day. Wright was the only architect that I'm aware of that had the moxie to try to design a house with concrete block. I mean, what do you do to concrete block? Well, Frank, you know, took the grout out of the middle, and then he corbelled. So, and then there's just some more of the letter. So they acknowledged the letter back, and then they talk about hiring one of Wright's apprentices, Benny Dunbar, to oversee the house. And we got to know the Dunbar family here in Cincinnati, and this was his obituary in 2006. Abe Dunbar, Ben's brother, was the first Taliesin student. In 1932, Wright came here and spoke to a realtor convention, and Abe saw it and left UC and went to Taliesin to study with him. Shortly after, his younger brother, Benjamin, left also. And then they had worked with Wright for many years, and then the war, and then they came back to Cincinnati, and they continued to have very long-lived careers, architecture careers, both of these gentlemen, which is one of the reasons we have so many Wright-like homes. The wood, the parapet way that he laid up his siding, where it prevents it south vertically, you'll see on some homes in Cincinnati. And then the brick technique, which if you had an unlimited budget, you'd get fieldstone and tidewater cypress from Frank Lloyd Wright. If you had a bit more modest budget, you'd get brick and tidewater cypress, like the Boswell house in Indian Hill. If you had a good budget, you'd get a textured block house like the Tompkins house. But if your budget was bare minimum, you'd get what we got, which was redwood and concrete block. And just after we had purchased the house, the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy, his architect John Eifler invited me to his office in Chicago. We had a 2-hour discussion. He was telling me about the plans of our house, because and he looked at it, and he looked at the fact that it specified paint on the window frames. And he said that was the first time he had ever seen paint specified on a set of Frank Lloyd Wright plans. So it's just a way to protect the redwood, which is just not as sturdy a wood as tidewater cypress. So here's the Boulter acknowledging that Benny's on the job and able to work with the building department. Now these are the super interesting photos of the house being constructed. It's the first time we've shown these to any audience. This is the fireplace, and this is the second floor. And the second floor is hung from the ceiling, from the large roof rafters, by wood mullions that are linked in here. They're twin mullions. So here you see a view of the entrance of the house, which is through this area here to the left of Pat. This is a window into the kitchen. And these are some steel structure that's the roof of the carport. Sometime during the house construction, there must have been a crisis because there wasn't a staircase specified for the steps in the basement. So, Lordy, they had to get a telegram from Frank Lloyd Wright to specify the basement stairs should have, you know, a railing. Here's a view of the front of the house. This is a view looking west. So these are the 2 by 8 inch wood mullions that are on the south side. And then here's the second floor that's hung from the rafters that are up here. And then Pat and John. These U's are for hot water heat in the floor. Another view of Pat and John and the pipes here. Now these are the 2 by 8 foot mullions, and then on the inside is a big massive 4 by 4 beam, but it doesn't touch the floor here. It's just lag bolted to this beam to keep it straight. I was all worried when I got the house and the 4 by 4s weren't touching the floor. Well, they're not meant to. These are sitting in 5/8 inch pins here. So the correspondence goes on and talking about receiving some plans for the dining room chairs, and they're looking for decorations and fabrics. Here's the view from the front of the house. You can see these thin wood mullions. That's all that supports the south of the house. And at the very top, they have concentric wood that goes around these small windows. This is the second floor line here, and it sets back from the front of the house about 6 feet, and then these are small windows in the back, and this is the larger room on the west side that we call Cedric's room. We call it Cedric, Pat, John, and Ted. The rooms. Here's some more pictures of those mullions, and they're putting in the terrace that's on the south side of the house. They're starting to get the framing in, and then they started to enclose some of Cedric's room so that they could do some of the interior finishing work. The house is a three-dimension fabric because the mullions go vertically, and then these massive Douglas fir beams go from front to back, and the second floor is hung from the ceiling by another set of wood mullions. This balcony on the west side goes right through the glass on the west side of the house. The carport roof on the east side, that steel I-beam penetrates the glass facade and becomes a plant ledge inside the house. And at all times, the structure of the house is the beauty of the house, and it is the windows. The building department allowed him to use the structural mullions as the window frames, which is not code. So Eugene here acknowledges Pat's interest in having the furniture designed as it was for the New York exhibition house. So those many more elaborate Frank homes would get, or Frank Lloyd Wright homes would get, I got to learn to stop saying his name, would get his own special design. That's something that kept our budget down. Another note from Mrs. Boulter. And here's a photograph of the finished house with the forsythia that they planted in the front yard. And it was stained with a very red stain. Some other black and white photographs that we have of the finished home. They were used in an article somewhere. They're marked for publication specifications on the back of the photographs. And you see here that the concrete block is not painted, and that's the way it was designed, not to be painted. It was when the second owner came to the house, and there was moss, some moss growing on the north side living room wall, and he was a big fan of the light tan color of falling water, so he proceeded to paint the concrete block a light tan color, much to the dismay of Patricia Boulter and the other architectural aficionados. I still am trying to figure out if I can get the paint off of the concrete block. I don't heard pecan shells or I might try dry ice. So here's a picture of Pat in the living room, and that typifies the Wright's design. I mean, you have this large 40-foot living room and with no columns in it, but to do that you have very small bedrooms and a small kitchen. There's some of their antiquities they have on the shelves, and this is one of the reasons that they built the addition so quickly a year and a half after they built this house, because they have two rambunctious young boys with no place to play. They can hardly play in their little 98 square foot bedroom, but that includes the bed and the desk. Here's another picture of those very thin wood mullions. And these are the dining room table on the way to the pathway to the kitchen. That was from the New York exhibition house. This shows these massive 4-inch by 14-inch deep Douglas fir beams that sandwich each one of those 2-inch by 8-inch mullions. And this shows how the parapet walkway from the second floor goes right through the glass wall on the west side. And here's the last letter from Mr. Wright to the Boulters, wanting them to tote up the sum. All totaled, we think the house cost about $37,500 to finish the house, which is pretty amazing still, to be able to accomplish something. I mean, Jan and I were living in a Japanese wooden piece of art. And I'm so amazed that George Shepper could look at 12 pieces of paper and build. He built the house is exactly the way the plans indicate. The only place that was different was on the 8-inch block wall on the north side. Mr. Wright's plans showed you carving out the concrete block and then inserting the treads to the stairs. And I take it that, they said, no, we can't deal with that structurally because it's supporting the house. Now you're taking what used to be only 1 block thick wall, and you're trying to support these because the house is hanging from these. So they put a side on it, which you can hardly tell. This is the segue to what the house has taught me, and it's rekindled my interest in architecture, and I've tried to learn, well, what happened to Frank Lloyd Wright's legacy, because I took a 30-year break, ran, and I still run a marketing communications firm. I started working for my dad 35 years ago and never finished up school. But here I was able to purchase this home, and it rekindled my interest in it. So we traveled all over to look at Wright homes and went to the archives, and I was looking for what would be the next thing if Mr. Wright was still alive. And it's exemplified by his great-grandson, Eric, who has a green building architecture sustainability firm in Santa Monica in California. So this, I've learned about the U.S. Green Building Council, and I passed it, got my LEED AP accreditation. I got served on the board of the local chapter, and I was invited to teach renewable energy at Cincinnati State, and I started teaching classes to let people pass the green building exam. And this is just a series of slides that I use in my classroom class to study for the exam, and they just show some pictures of the house. And I'll sort of talk a little bit about its sustainability. But this was what the house looked like a week before we bought it. There was still a 30-foot tall Osage orange in the front yard, which blew over a week before we bought the house. So when we got it, it was all just grass. David Gosling really loved the house. If you go to my website, you'll see a show that we put together, an interview with the architects that saved the house structurally. But this just shows the corner lot and where I might be putting some geothermal in. And we've let the front of the yard go back to woods. If you go there and look at it today, you can't see the house during the summer. During the winter, with all the leaves gone, you can see the house, but it gives us more privacy. Makes the house warm.
Makes it work.
Makes it work, right, yes. This is the entrance of the house. The Goslings enclosed the carport. This was a carport where you would turn left with your car and go in and park under the carport. But the Goslings wanted a master bedroom, so the addition over here, they made that their master bedroom. That was Cedric's study when he retired, and that's why they enclosed the carport. They did a very nice job of doing that. This just shows some of the landscaping lights that David had initially turned on the house to come on every night and go on every 10 o'clock at night. Well, that was just too much for us, and
Our neighbors too.
from some of my research, I found that you don't, for landscaping lights, you turn them on the landscape, so that when you're in the house, then the landscape reflects the light back in the house. So it's very. Other parts of my green building and trying to improve the energy efficiency of the house is to take some thermal imaging photos of the house. We've registered the house for LEED. We're trying to get, LEED Platinum for the house. I got LEED Platinum for my office last year. It'll be very, very difficult to do because of a lot of the windows that we have. So here's a picture of the southwest corner of the house with the dining room table from the exhibition. But that's the glass that I'm trying to figure out what to do, whether to have automatic blinds come up that are insulating blinds that come up, and then automatic shades that come down from the top to shade it during the summer, because that's what we finally had to do. I mean, it's a solar hemicycle house. It faces south, and it's got all this glass, but it was designed to be in the woods, because the overhang is only this big for a two-story. The overhang should be 8 feet to shade all that glass. So it's a fish out of water when it was built. We don't have 80-foot trees. It never were on that lot. So we tried to plant bamboo on the terrace, and finally we just put blinds on the outside of the windows, shade blinds. This is a picture of the fireplace, which works great, and it has a very unique grate that we recreated. This shows the thermal imaging pictures of the heating that's in the floor. And it's very, very comfortable. We're very lucky that it works fine. Most likely it's because it's drained well. Most of these systems failed because they rusted from the outside in, but because we're on a hillside, must be very well drained. Just a view of the carport. They enclosed this, and this was the addition. And just recently, last fall, I injected foam into the concrete block wall. On the north side, there was nothing in that 8-inch block, zero. Little did I know, I was getting better thermal from the window versus a block that had all the air blew right through the block. So now we pumped a shaving cream foam in there, and it acts as a vapor barrier, which we didn't have, and it also raises it to a whopping, R10. In the addition, we finished the bathroom to the same style that was on the second floor. It had never been finished, so we recreated that. This is a view on the second floor, walking down to Cedric's room. And then this is a view of one of the little bedrooms on the second floor. They're so small that the bed has to roll out from underneath the desk to get the full length of the bed. Because on this end is the closet, and to get into the closet, you have to roll the bed back up under the nook here. It's a boat. This house is a boat. It's got Cedric's room is the pilot house, and the kitchen's the galley, and the bathroom's the head, and these are the state rooms. Here's Cedric's room. It has a nice large desk for writing. Now these last pictures that I'm going to show are from a UC architectural student project. They came to the house and documented the house and recorded everything, but they also did a Google SketchUp model of the house, which are some really nice aerial views and show the house. And it's available to download on the house's website. You can take a virtual tour through the house.
How does the water get off a flat roof like that when it rains?
It has a very gradual slope from front to back. There's some drains here. The Goslings put some downspouts in. Initially, it had scuppers every 8 feet, which Mr. Wright liked to just have the rain go around the foundation, but that's not such a good idea. The Goslings put in a drain here that went off that way, so they added some downspouts. There's only one scupper left, and that's right here, and it kind of makes a nice waterfall in the rain. Oh, you can just see right through the windows here, and there's the fireplace, and there's the kitchen.
Who cleans the windows?
Oh, I do. It's much easier than cleaning hundreds of little panes. My fingers hurt just thinking about it. Here we just use a squeegee.
Furniture came with the house. How much furniture?
All the furniture was designed by Taliesin and came with the house. So the dining room table and the hassocks and the coffee table, some end tables, and then everything's built into the house as well. So this table came with it. These are heritage Hendrigen chairs that we have. This coffee table came with the house, and these are the hassocks that came with the house. These are some more of the sketches from the UC students. And then if you would like to learn more, you can go to the website, Wright Boulter, .com/site. You can look at the video here, or you can download the Google SketchUp model. And just after we purchased the house, we got together with Susan Rissover and Chris McGee and other architects. Susan's a modern realtor, and started this group, CF3, and we created these 8 banners, these 8 historical banners to the left of the elevator. And if you're interested in learning more about mid-century modern, I suggest you join CF3. It's inexpensive, and we primarily do social events and tours. We'll be touring Aaron Betsky's house next weekend. Oh, it's sold out, Janet tells me. So, any questions?
We're booked.
Yes? Yeah.
Frank Lloyd Wright's house in Corbelling East in Wisconsin was built to his scale, and he was a small man. So the furniture is small. You said that he built the furniture into yours too. Did he build it to his scale or to the other person's scale?
I was small, still on a small scale.
It's still small?
Especially the dining room chairs were on a small scale. The Heritage Hendridge and armchairs were a bit larger in scale. Yes?
How comfortable is that banquette that the house has built in?
Well, the banquette that's on the north side in the living room, it's very useful. It's a great seating, and there's storage both behind it and under the seats.
She asked him if it was comfortable.
Oh, it's very comfortable. It's a very nice,
Like it.
nice angle. The cats like it. Yes.
Are any of the original textiles stamped?
Yes, there are some original textiles.
The bed.
The bedrooms have it in Cedric's room. Pat gave us some of the textiles from Cedric's room. However, it's unfortunate that being drapes, the first set of drapes was disposed of. Now, the second set we've saved. It wasn't, there aren't original Taliesin drapes, but we're on our third set of drapes. Yes, originally the house didn't have a master bedroom. I'm not sure why Cedric and Pat wanted separate bedrooms. Cedric was 20 years older than Pat, and he, by the looks of his desk, he sure wrote a lot. So,
They did ask for a master, but in the end,
So
they
Janet-
went with 4 bedrooms.
Janet says they did ask for a master, but in the end, they wound up with 4 bedrooms. So, I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be hard. The Sturtevant house was designed, took 2 of those little 100-square-foot bedrooms and put them together to have a whopping 200-square-foot bedroom, whereas the addition is the 800-square-foot.
You've got concrete floors with
Yes.
radiant heat. Was the house designed for passive solar?
Yes, yeah, it was designed as a passive solar house, and it was designed with the radiant floors, which Wright invented at the first Jacobs house, putting hot water in the floors. And there's a very good book out called Wrightscapes about Wright's passive solar designs. Yes?
The bedrooms are very small, and that seems to be a characteristic of this house and not unique to this house.
Right. Bedrooms are small.
But they're so small as to be difficult really to function.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why do people like that?
Well, people like the great room. That's what Wright's houses are famous for. I mean, we have this huge, beautiful, expansive living room that the Goslings had 2 grand pianos in the living room. So that's what you like, that you give up other things.
And he did it to keep the cost down.
And you know, Janet mentioned he does it to keep the cost down. So, I mean, that he also doesn't have attics to keep the cost down, doesn't have basements to keep the cost down, or garages.
Presumably, some of the people who were his clients didn't care so much about the cost, but I think still bedrooms were small.
Well,
I
that's.
went through one falling water,
Mhm.
but they were very small.
Well, the Boswell house here in Indian Hill, it's a 5,000 square foot home and has very nicely appointed bedrooms. And it is a perfect example of what you can get when you know, your budget and your acreage is much bigger.
One more philosophical.
What's been your biggest maintenance challenge or issue?
Well, luckily, nothing. The Goslings redid the foundation, and that was a huge expense, and then redid the roof, and we've done just fun things like restore the kitchen and restored the bathroom and the carport. So but boy, I babied my roof, I gotta say. Yes, Mindy?
Can you describe your kitchen?
Oh, yes, the kitchen. Well, you know how they have the kitchen triangle, where in a triangle you can get to everything? In our kitchen, it's the point. So you can have the sink here, the stove here, and the refrigerator is right here. So it's only a 30 square foot kitchen.
Is it galley style? Galley would be.
It's like a little L. I mean, the one galley is 6 foot long, and then the L is 4 foot long. But Janet got woof ovens, double woof, 30-inch wide woof ovens. We have double ovens in there, and we have a large Sub-Zero refrigerator. And you know, we did the kitchen, and we took the electric stove and used that electricity to properly power a kitchen, and we tapped into the gas for a wood or a gas stove. So we love our kitchen. It's but it's like a very expensive boat's kitchen. Yes.
Did you have many leaks? Because I've been through quite a few of them when you first built them.
No. Well, and this house had that problem too. When they built it, they put down tar, paper, and asphalt and gravel, and that leaked. Whereas finally, when the Goslings redid our roof in the late 80s, they used a modified bitumen hot sealed roof, and this stuff is used for swimming pools, and it doesn't leak at all. But I take very good care of my roof too. I don't let it. It's always got coatings on it, and so it's very well protected.
I think we've got another.
Yes, yes.
The windows, are they double glazed or?
No, just single pane. I'm looking into maybe replacing them with double pane.
That's a pain.
Well, they're $350 a piece. I need 5 48-inch by 129-inch windows. It wouldn't be too difficult to do. The other windows in the front of the house these are doors. There's 4 10-foot tall doors. These are doors here that they're 2 foot wide by 10 foot tall each door. So I'm just gonna put storm doors and leave that, because I'm gonna make the screen doors a storm door, and so I'll at least have some insulation.
You actually go out?
Yes, we use them all the time. It's just unbelievable when the house is open. There is no inside, there's no outside, so. Yes?
Can you tell us a little bit about the first decision, like when you decided to buy the house? Like, were you at all really into
Oh, that's an interesting story.
And then even afterwards, like how did it influence your
Marriage?
I have to
Well,
it sort of changed your life.
oh, it has changed my life quite a bit. But, you know, I was cleaning out my office and I saw a business courier that said there was a Wright house going for auction. And this was an old paper, and it was going off auction in 2 days. So we drove by it, and then I went in, Jan and I went and saw it, and I was blown away. I really fell in love with the house. But we were in a modest colonial in Pleasant Ridge, and I didn't think I had the wherewithal to get all this together. So, but I wanted to go to the auction. That was on Thursday, and Janet, she wouldn't go. My realtor didn't show up, and I was sitting there, and then the auction started happening, and we had set a limit that we could pay, and it came, and the auction closed, and it was below the limit, and I didn't raise my hand. I was so tongue-tied. Well, I was just dejected. I couldn't believe it, that it went for less than what we had said was our maximum number. And Janet felt my pain as well. She thought she probably wouldn't be able to live with me. So, you know, and over the weekend, I got a sense that the young man that won the auction, something wasn't right. So I called him and asked him how it was going. He says, well, he was bidding for somebody else, and he didn't realize there was a 10% buyer's premium on anything he bid. So the guy he was bidding for wouldn't go to 10%. So here's this young man, he's upside down, and I said, well, we negotiated 3%. He was happy, he needed the money, and I just took over the rights to the auction. So that was just the beginning.
Do we have to look it up or you just tell us?
Well, I don't have it written down anywhere. But, you know, Janet has an aluminum helmet that sits in the closet that her sister made for her to keep the cooties away. It was something like that for a while. But then Janet got a kitchen. That's the first rule if a guy's getting a house. He's got to get his wife a kitchen. And then, well, Janet, why don't you come up and say what?
I think that's plenty.
We bought it in 2003. But it's been a lot to me, and Janet's come to enjoy the house. It's a wonderful place to live because of the outside and the inside. But then having a house that's so public is not such a good thing, and you don't really have as much privacy as you'd like. But it's meant the world for me. I mean, it's been expensive, but I've learned about the green building movement and what the real meaning of architecture is to me, you know. And so that's been invaluable, and it's given me something that I've gone now beyond the house, and I'm involved in promoting sustainability and green building in Cincinnati. And it was just because of this house that sort of got me interested in looking at it. So, like most things, it's the people that live in architecture. So I hope to carry on that same knowledge and sharing and enthusiasm to both people that are interested in Frank Lloyd Wright, but then teaching them that he was one of the originators of a sustainable architecture. And thank you all very much.